Hi, my name is Maria Farfa and welcome to my channel, Expanded States. In this video, I'd like to talk about a different way of understanding and perceiving our internal landscape, our mind, and what happens inside of our heads. So this is a topic that is very dear to my heart because I have found it to be very useful for cultivating more self-awareness, for cultivating more compassionate relationships with those around me, and for guiding myself through maybe conflicting situations or rough patches that I might be going through. So working with the mind in this way is one of the most profound ways that I have found to be able to access and release deep-seated shame, trauma, sadness, grief, and all of these different wounds that we carry in our most vulnerable places of ourselves. One of the things that I also like about this way of working with the mind is that its focus is not on fixing certain behaviors or certain problem attitudes. The focus here is actually on creating a better relationship with ourselves, creating more self-awareness, creating more self-understanding. When we're able to nurture those inner relationships, we create those deeper connections to ourselves, and we're able to show up in the world more harmoniously, more coherently, more compassionately. The more that we have access to our authentic self energy, the more clear that we are, and the less restricted and conflicted we are with ourselves, with those around us. So the first concept that I want to introduce to you is the multiplicity of the mind. So what does that mean, the multiplicity of the mind? For many of us, the multiplicity of the mind might actually sound kind of scary, to consider that we have multiple personalities inside. But I'd like to introduce this in a friendly way, in a way that actually makes sense. Because when we start to understand that our mind is made up of different parts, and all of these parts have different needs, we're able to have more self-understanding, more self-awareness, and we can actually start to pay attention to the individual voices inside of our head. In a conscious way, we can actually tend to these different needs in a way that makes sense for us, in a way that helps us be better people, to be more whole, to be more understood, make ourselves more understood in the world, create less conflict with those around us. So along with this concept of the multiplicity of the mind, I'd like to introduce a different sort of language. This is a language of parts work, and this way of perceiving the internal landscape starts to give us a better way of noticing the different parts. So let's go through a little exercise, and maybe we can start to see what different parts are inside of you that are needing some attention right now. Very briefly, go ahead and close your eyes and notice, maybe bring to memory a conflict you might have had recently. Maybe an argument with a family member, maybe something going on at work or at home that you're having some challenges with and sorting out. Once you've identified this particular situation, start noticing how many different perspectives can you hold around this particular issue. Maybe there's a part of you that wants to get rid of the whole situation altogether. There might be another part that wants to mediate and to solve the conflict or solve the problem. There might be another part that has a lot of ideas on how to go about solving it. There might be another part that feels frustrated because this is happening. There might be another part of you that feels misunderstood or dismissed if maybe your voice isn't being heard, if this was maybe an argument or a moment when you felt like you needed to be heard and you were not. So once you start noticing all these different voices and all these different parts inside of you, you can start to notice that they can actually coexist at the same time. You don't have just one single perspective on the situation at hand. There are many different perspectives and factors that come into place to color your perception of what the situation might be like. So go ahead and open your eyes if you had them closed. And now that we have a little bit of a different type of language to start discerning internally those different voices, we can start calling them parts. And we can start to see that even though some of these parts are like in conflict with each other, they might be polarized or might have perspectives that seem radical to you, they still can all coexist in the same system, right, inside of you. So let me ask you, what would happen if you could have a conversation with all of these different parts? What would happen if you could sit in a living room and have every one of those parts sit around and you can have a conversation with all of them? Sounds like an interesting concept, right? So let me ask you another question. Who would mediate that conversation? So now that we have started to see the multiplicity of the mind in a more compassionate lens, we can start to change language around it. So we're considering that we're talking with different parts inside of us. And there's yet another element of your personality, and it is this quality of self, or this energy of self. So self is actually not a part. It does not have an agenda, and it does not have particular need that it needs to have met. Self is actually your most innate, indestructible essence. The essence that you are born with, that you come into this world to fulfill your life's purpose with. It is the essence that is unique to you and has no positive or negative quality to it. It doesn't have needs, it doesn't have aversions, it simply is. It's the quality of being. So this energy of self, or this quality of self, actually mediates between all the parts. The more access to self that you're able to have, the less blended you become. What does being blended mean? What does that even look like? So I might feel like there's a part of me that's frustrated, and there's also a part of me that is sad. There's also a part of me that is upset. And all of that might look like one entire thing, right? But if you start breaking down the different components of it, you might see that there's different parts that are having different agendas, different parts that have different perspectives, different needs that are unmet. The more blended that we are, the less in ourselves that we are, the less clear, the more confused we might feel. Especially when the parts start blending with each other. The less blended that we are, the more self-energy that we have access to, the more clear that we can be, more connected we can feel, the more compassionate we can be with ourselves and with the situation that we may be dealing with. So the more blended that we are, the more identified we feel with the different emotions and perspectives inside of us, the less access to our innate energy that we have. So let's talk a little bit about the self. What is self? What are the qualities of self? And how do I recognize when I am in self, or when I have enough self-energy and I'm not speaking through one of these parts? These qualities can come in the form of a sense of calm. They might look like a childlike curiosity. It might be a sense of connectedness or interconnection, maybe internally or externally. This might look like confidence and courage, the ability to do something without experiencing fear or experiencing hesitation or insecurity. To be in self might actually elicit some of your creativity. And this creativity might show up as artistic talent, or might show up as a creative way to solve problems, or it might even show up as having clarity, as being very clear on what it is that you want, very clear on what it is that benefits you the most. And of course, one of the most fitting signs of being in self is the quality of compassion. To be compassionate to oneself and to be compassionate to the world around us. So that is actually how you know that you are in self, when you're inhabiting any one of these qualities in a big way or in a small way. That actually helps you be more connected to who you truly are, what you're actually here to do, and to help you mediate between all of these different parts in a way that is harmonious and can bring more self-awareness. So let's get back to those parts. Turns out that there are different types of parts. Some of these parts are protectors. They are protective of our entire system. These parts might have developed very early on in life, when you might have needed to fend for yourself or problem solve when nobody else was around to help you. In the face of maybe a traumatic event, they might have come in to protect you. And these aren't necessarily external forces that just hijack your system. These are internal mechanisms that we develop as we're growing up. So we develop these protective parts to our system to help keep us safe, to help keep us contained, and to maintain and regulate the system internally when we're not able to experience that from the outside. So there are different types of protectors. Some of the protector parts might be very fast acting. We call those firefighters. And some of the other types of protectors, we call them managers, because their work is more on a day-to-day, constant, low-level type of pressure. Well, sometimes it can be high-level type of pressure, but some of these can be seen maybe in your inner critic, or the part of you that always tries to maintain a certain status or a certain perception, to be perceived as a certain quality or in a certain way by those around you. Whereas the firefighter protectors, because they're more fast acting, they're a lot of times a lot more impulsive, reactive, in the moment sort of protectors. These can be the ones that lash out, that scream, that seek to cope in immediate ways and just have to protect the system immediately, right here and right now. And then we have another type of part, or another category of part, and this is the part of you that might be exiled. I like to call these the vulnerable parts. They get solidified in a particular experience that we have as children, and a lot of times because we're not able to voice our concerns, we're not able to find a soothing touch or a gentle, kind word or something that can help us regulate as a young child, then they become frozen. They get stuck in time and they hang on to a wound or a particular pain, a sadness, a sorrow. These exile parts a lot of times will end up acting out, and when they act out, that's when the protectors actually become activated. This might look like distractions, it might look like sleepiness or laziness, avoidance, reaction, escapism, all sorts of different ways that we avoid feeling that initial pain, that initial hurt. So what do we do with this information? Now you know that there are different parts to your mind. Some parts of your mind are here to protect you. Some parts of your mind hold deep wounds. And then there's this other quality to you that is neither of those two, and that is your self energy, that virtue inside of you that has the inner knowing, the deep knowing, your inner intelligence, that gut feeling, the deep resonance connection that has that capacity for compassion and for creativity. So how do you manage to keep all of these parts in a way that is cohesive and helpful to your entire system? How do you keep your personality working for you and not against you? How do you keep this inner landscape healthy? So the first thing is to start becoming aware of those inner parts. Next time that you feel you're getting into an argument, you're getting upset about something that happened, you're getting triggered by something you heard, just start to become aware of the different parts that are coming up, right? And one thing that you can use is just to start talking to yourself in this specific way with this language of parts, and start noticing all the different parts that come up. Sometimes you can also feel them in your body. In fact, all of these parts have some place in your body that they live in, because everything that we experience in our life is recorded in our physical being. So another tip that I can offer you right now is you can start to notice where in your body these parts might be coming up. Maybe you feel it in your gut, maybe you feel it in your head, maybe it's a lump in your throat, maybe it's a tension in your shoulders, maybe it's tiredness in your legs. However it is that they show up, just pay attention, just notice it. And then the next thing that you can do is start actively engaging it in a conversation. Get curious about it. Ask that part what message it brings to you. And if perhaps you feel like you might not even want to engage in that inner dialogue, you can ask that part if it can give you a little space for a moment so that you can take a deep breath in, right? So you start creating that connection. You start noticing that this part is there and it's coming up for a reason. And if it can just give you a little bit of space, maybe you can start to find some of those answers on your own. It can share that with you, that part can tell you why it's here, or maybe you can just get that inner knowing, that understanding, right? That is when your self is becoming active. Your inner intelligence is starting to understand why these things are coming up and why you're reacting the way that you're reacting. So why is this a useful way to understand your mind and your inner landscape? Well, this might come in handy so that instead of reacting in the face of something that upsets you, you might take a moment to breathe into it, to notice what is happening, and to try to find a different way of accessing the situation that might not be as impulse reaction, an unconscious reaction, right? There's a great difference between reactions and responses, right? One is more conscious than the other, and it all takes self-awareness, self-understanding of the internal processes. If you're interested in individual coaching sessions, you can book a session with me. You can find me on mariafarfan.com. All my links for social media are in the description of this video. So go ahead and send me any questions on a private message if you have anything specific that you would like to talk about in your particular case. Thinkers, philosophers, psychologists, mystics, all sorts of people have been trying to understand the mind for as long as humans have been around. It has been our purpose to try to understand this beautiful mind that helps us be in the world. This particular model is called internal family systems, and there's lots of content on the internet about it. I will be posting different videos and different content, expanding a little bit on some of the information that I gave you here today. I'll be talking a little bit more about what do these protectors do, how can we engage with them better, what are different ways that we can access ourself, meditations, exercises, different ways to cultivate greater and greater access to yourself. I'll also be posting content on the different types of wounds that those exiles suffer, because we are all wounded. All of us inevitably have experienced some form of wound growing up, whether intentional or unintentional in the ways that we were raised. None of us are free from having had experiences that shaped the way that we react, the way that we are in the world. If any of the concepts that I mentioned or any of the things that I talked about seem to ring a bell for you or you resonated with it, go ahead and leave it in the comments so that I can address it in future videos. So if you would like to be notified when I post new videos about this and other content on expanded states, meditation, breath work, yoga, self-awareness, psychology, shamanism, go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you next time.